Welcome back to my channel. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you have been following and just like that, the Sex and the City reboot, and you saw last week's episode in which Miranda speaks to Steve and asks him for a divorce. We all know that Miranda has been going through a midlife crisis. You know, we saw in the beginning of the season she was drinking a lot. Then she became enamored with Shay Diaz, and then they started having sex. And now Miranda thinks she's in love with her, and she went ahead and she asked Steve for a divorce. The internet is blowing up. Justice for Steve, things like that. Everybody loves Steve Brady, right? How do you not? He's a staple in the Sex and the City series, a great guy, um, treated her so well. He's the stuff that the ideal man is made of. And yes, he's not rich like Mr. Big or sophisticated or doesn't have a fancy career. He's not tall and dark and handsome. He's cute, but he's not the man of woman's perceived dreams. But he turns out to be a really solid guy, lovable guy, good father, good husband, all those things. Yes, he did cheat on her in the first movie. That aside, Steve is a good guy and he's a fan favorite. So it broke our hearts when we saw her ask for a divorce. Well, it broke our hearts when we saw her cheating on him to begin with. And then when she asked him for a divorce, it was a sad moment. You saw the heartbreak on his face, and one of the things that he said that really stood out to me is this. He reminded her that he's been fighting for them since the beginning of time. Since they got together, he's always the one who has been consistent, who's been fighting for the relationship. He's accepted a lot of her nonsense. There's been so many highs and lows in their relationship, and he's the one who keeps them together. And when he said that, it was a drawback to the entire season, and it made me think about it. It's like, you know what? He's right. At every turn, when Miranda was being Miranda, being a control freak, being neurotic, being selfish, all of those things, he was consistent and he allowed her to be her, and that's why they remained together. And so you thought that, oh, wow, they got married at the end of the series and they had the kid and they moved to Brooklyn and they're happily ever after. And just to find out that pulls this she pulls this stunt when they're about 20 years in and breaks his heart. And it's really sad because Steve has to start over. Miranda thinks she's starting over. She thinks she's starting a new chapter in her life with Shay. And I predict that that's not going to pan out the way that she thought it was. But Steve really has been blindsided. He didn't prepare for this. He thought this is what the rest of his life was going to look like, and she threw a monkey wrench in that. And I think he will land on his feet because he's a good guy, and there's a lot of women out there who want what he has to offer. But it's just sad. And this made me think about the entire series. And when last week's episode was over, I came to the conclusion that, you know what, Steve is better off without Miranda. She never valued him. She never treated him the way he should have been treated. We all laughed along throughout the series. Steve was like that funny guy. He took it on the chin, and we thought it was just the nature of their relationship. But when we take a step back and think about it, if Steve was our brother, our son, any man in our life, we would not want him to be with a woman who treated him like that. And so while it's sad, I think he's much better off. And to illustrate this point, I've developed a collage of moments, 12 moments, in fact, in which Miranda treated Steve like trash. So my die-hard Sex and the City fans will remember in season 2 when Miranda and Steve first met. Miranda was at a bar. She was waiting for Carrie. Carrie stood her up because she was hanging out with Big, and Steve was the bartender. She was being snooty to him. She was in a bad mood because she had just gotten stood up. She also was down on men because she had had a bad date earlier in that episode. And Steve was being Steve, nice to her, talking to her, chatting her up, and she was being rude, dismissive, all of those things that Miranda can be when she's at her worst. Because Steve is the ever-loving, easygoing, patient dude he is, he indulged her. The two ended up in bed with each other. And after what was described as mind blowing sex, he says the next natural thing, which is, what women want to hear. Hey, it was a good time. Let's hang out again together. And she dismisses him. She treats him like a dude. When he asks to see her again, she says, why? Just rude and nasty for no reason. Girl, you just slept with this man. Why are you treating him like this? It would not be cool if the roles were reversed and a man treated a woman like that right after sex. We all know that. But, this was early in the series. We didn't know that Steve was going to stick around. We thought it was a one off, and it just spoke to Miranda's cold, stoic ways, the reversal of the traditional male female roles. But that's when it all started. And yes, in her defense, Steve accepted it. He continued to pursue her. But this relationship started off with her disrespecting this man, and it set the tone for how things were going to be moving forward. The third time she treated him like trash was the same night. He asked her if he can meet up with her where she's going to meet with her friends, and he shows up, and she just treats him, and she disrespects him in front of the girls. And when he pulls her aside and asks her, like, hey, what's going on here? Like, why do you hate men? Because it clearly can't be me. I just met you. And she makes some snarky remark about maybe she slept with too many bartenders. So clearly this was all about what had happened previously. It had nothing to do with Steve. But again, why are you being so mean to this man? He's doing is showing a genuine interest in you, and you're being a bitch. We fast forward a little bit and we see that Miranda does realize Steve's a good guy. She gives it a shot. They get into a relationship, move in together, and she breaks up with him. And again, I'm not saying she did not have any reasons to break up with him, but it's always on Miranda's terms. When he tells her there's good stuff here, she shoots him down. It's similar to what she said at the end, where she says she wants more. This is just another example of her treating Steve like he's not enough, like he's not good enough. It's her choice of words that disturb me the most. You can break up with somebody without making them feel like they're a loser or that they're not good enough for you. And there's always a hint of that in their conversations with each other. Y'all remember when she ran away from him in the street? She and Carrie were out. He was walking down the street playing basketball. She sees him and just starts running in the other direction. Not to mention it's immature. This is a high powered attorney. She's intelligent. She's a Harvard grad, all these things. And she can't handle just seeing her boyfriend in the street. It's just so disrespectful and characteristic of the way she treats him. She doesn't even have enough respect for this man to run into him in the street and be courteous. Later on in the season, Carrie's boyfriend Aiden and Steve become friends. Whenever Steve is around Carrie, he's always asking about Miranda. Why? Because she doesn't call him back. Again, she's just plain rude. It was around season 4, season 5, when we really got to see how uncompromising Miranda could be. When she got pregnant from Steve, and granted it was a mistake, she calls it a mercy F. She decides, first she thought about having an abortion and she changes her mind. She was going to have the abortion, she wasn't going to tell Steve. Fine. Or not fine. I'm not going to cast judgment on that. But when she decides she's going to have the baby, she tells him. And the way she tells him is so matter of fact. Look, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it for me. You don't have to do nothing. You can come over and visit whenever you can. I mean, sis, I get it. It's your body. But you can't push this man out of this process. And it's not even like Steve was some one night stand dude who you don't know. You were in a whole relationship with him. Granted, you don't have to be with him. You don't have to marry him. All of these things. But you have to give this man a little bit more of an in. He's about to be a father. And she just pushed him out of the process. And when Steve tried to do quote unquote the right thing and proposed to her because he thought it made sense, they're having a baby together, what's her response? Are you effing crazy? Now, granted, he didn't really want to marry her. He just thought it was the right thing to do. But give the man some credit for that. Why is her response to him always so disrespectful and dismissive? They're discussing baby names. She says Danny. What does he think? And asks Steve what he thinks. He says Paul because it's a name that has a lot of meaning in his family's background. She clearly doesn't like it. She dismisses the idea. And what does Steve say? Okay, Danny's good. He just keeps giving in to her. And I will repeat, this is also on Steve because he allows her to behave this way. But Miranda won't give. You'd ask the man his opinion, and when he gives his opinion, you just shut it down. Miranda behaved like this was the Immaculate Conception, and she conceived this child all by herself. And nothing illustrated that better than the naming of the baby. She decided it was going to be Danny. Steve went along with it. And at the hospital, or right after she gives birth, she decides that the child's name is going to be Brady. And for those of you who don't know, Steve's surname is Brady. So she made a decision to name their son, to give their son her husband's surname as his first name and give the child her last name. So the child's name ends up being Brady Hobbs. Brady is Steve's last name, and Hobbs is her last name. You didn't talk to Steve about it. So essentially, you took away the man's right to have his child have his surname, which I think is problematic if the child is if the father's in the child's life. And then it gets confusing because later on they get married. And I'm sure Miranda keeps her maiden name because of her business and because of who she is. But the child doesn't have his father's last name and the parents are married. So his name is it going to be Brady because Brady is his first name and Brady is his father's last name? Or is it still going to be Brady Hobbs and he's not going to have his father's last name? Like this is so problematic. And the reason it's a problem is because you decided you were going to, because Miranda decided to make a unilateral decision to do it the way she wanted to do it. She believed that giving Brady Steve's surname was her way of including him in the process. And it wasn't. But again, Steve went for it, which is a problem in and of itself. But this is just evidence of how it is all about her and how she wants to do things. And she made a decision at that moment that would affect them for the rest of their lives. The 11th time that Miranda treated Steve like trash is when she kicked him out of her apartment. This is probably season 5, maybe season 6. They weren't together, but they were co-parenting, and this is when she realized that she was in love with him. And, coincidentally, after he found a full-time girlfriend. So what does Miranda do when she's in love with somebody? She treats him like crap. She kicked him out of her apartment because he was spending too much time there. That makes perfect sense. And I'm going to end with the 12th time that Miranda treated Steve like trash. Is when she ruined their honeymoon. They finally get it together. They get married. It looks like it's going to be happily ever after. He wants to take his wife on a honeymoon. I know, the scoundrel. And what does she do? She complains that there's no television, that it's too quiet, that she left her charger, that he wants to cuddle, that he wants to have sex. Well, I mean, I get it. Not all women are affectionate and soft and pink inside, but damn, it's a honeymoon. And the saddest part is when he had to tell her, this is not just your honeymoon. She needed to have a moment in which somebody told her that it wasn't just about her. That a honeymoon is about two different people and that this is what Steve wants to do. And sometimes you have to give in and you have to bend. You married this man, allow this man to cuddle with his wife and have sex with his wife and spend some time in quiet with his wife. But the sad thing is that she couldn't draw that conclusion on her own. He had to tell her. And again, Steve gives in and says, you know what, we're just going to leave tomorrow because Miranda always gets her way. And there we have it, folks. The 12 times Miranda treated Steve like trash. And this is not to include what happened in the episode last week where she leaves him for a person who probably doesn't even want her anyway. Yeah, Steve just deserves better. I think we are all, or most of us are in agreement that, her leaving him was probably the best thing that could happen to him at this stage in his life. We are all hoping and praying that the fictional character of Steve Brady jumps on Tinder uh, or Match.com or eHarmony or something, and he meets a woman who will appreciate him and value him for the gem that he is. So that's all for today. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will be back next week to review, and just like that, episode 9.